Hello everyone, it's your boy Newbie Coder here with yet another video. This one's going to be on loops in Python. If you haven't watched my other videos, go ahead and check those out so you'll be well prepared for this session. Alright, without further ado, let's just jump right into loops. So what are loops? Or why do we need to use loops? Well, essentially they allow you to repeat a set of instructions multiple times. And that's useful because a lot of times you're dealing with lists or tuples or sets, and you want to loop through the elements inside the list. It could be 10 elements long, it could be 20 elements long, it could be 100, etc. You want to be able to loop through each individual element and do certain operations with it, or just simply print them out to the screen. So let's go ahead and explain how loops work with code. Alright, I'm in my terminal and I'm in my loops folder that I created. So let's open this up in VS Code. There you go. Now let's create a file called newbieloops.py. Alright, now let's see how loops work. Let's go ahead and define a list just like how I showed you. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and check out my other video on lists, so you're gonna really understand this video afterwards. So now we have a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and if you recall, we have index that starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Essentially, 0th index. At the 0th index you have 1, at the first index you have 2, etc, etc. That's how lists work. Now let me go ahead and call this list of numbers, and what we're gonna do probably later on is we're gonna run experiment on tuple as well as set. So tuple and set I also explained in my other video. So a tuple is similar to list, except it's immutable, so you can't change the elements of the tuple. And for a set, it basically only displays the unique elements, right? So if right now they're all unique, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but it can, maybe let's do it like this. It can accept something like this and spit out 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's only the unique element. Alright, so now that we have our list, tuple, and set ready, let's go ahead and loop over each element in this list of numbers and print it out. Now in order to do that, we need to do a for loop. In a for loop you have the iterator, and then you have the list or the tuple or whatever you're going to iterate on. So to do that, for index and you see from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it is basically a range or a series of numbers starting from 0 and ending at 6. Now the way to show that in Python is using a range function, which has a start, a stop, and a step. But we're not really concerned with step here because it's stepping by 1, so it's going from 0 to 1 to 2, 3. So you're gonna start from 0, comma, and you're gonna end at stop exclusive, which means whatever value you put here, it's gonna exclude that. So we need to include 6 because that's our last index. So we can stop at 7 because there's no such thing as 7th index in this list. So we're looping over this range, and each element in this range, we're calling it an index, and then we're using that value to index into this list. So basically, you're going to do list of numbers and index. If you don't know how this is working, you can go check out my video on list. But essentially, we're indexing into each element on that list because the value of index is starting from 0 and ending at 6. The way a for loop works is it starts from a value and it increments and then ends at the last value. And in this case, we're giving it these numbers or these series of numbers using the range 0 to 7, and we're looping over it with this for loop, and each element is going to be saved in this index variable, and that index variable is being used to access the element in the list of numbers. So I know it can kind of get confusing, but once you start playing around with it, you will see that it's very simple. And lastly, we want to print the result. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And as you can see, we've printed each element in this list of numbers one at a time. Now, notice I just put 7 here, but what if this list was 15 or 20 or 100? I won't know, right? I would have to count the elements in that list and then be able to put the stop for this range. So the better way of doing it is to use the length function on the list itself. So what does the length function do? It basically returns the number of items in a container, and in this case we're talking about this, and the number of items are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So it essentially, this is going to be replaced with a 7, and it's going to work the same way. So this is a better way of doing it, and it gives you the same answer. Perfect. Now, there's an easier way to do this, and Python allows you to do that, is by iterating over each element in the list itself. So notice in this, we were kind of iterating over the index, but with this new way, we can actually just iterate over element in list of numbers and print element. So we don't even have to do this because that was index, but we're actually printing the entire element. And if we run that, you basically get the same answer. So just to separate it out, this is for loop, and this is for loop. Actually, for loop using index, for loop over elements. Let's do it like that. That way you can kind of see the two. They give the same output. Now we're doing for element in list of numbers. This is a list of numbers, so we're going each element in this list and printing it out. Straightforward and simple. Now lastly, we could also use a while loop to iterate over these, and that's not the best way of doing this since we already know the length of this list. So when you know the length of a list, ideally you should use a for loop, but there's cases where you need to use a while loop because you're not certain how long the list is going to be. But let's go ahead and declare a variable or initialize it and say that index is 0. That means we're going to start at 0. And the way while loop works is you start off with while and then you give it condition. So when that condition is true, it will run through the loop. As soon as the condition is false, it will snap out of the loop. Okay, so we need to give it the true condition so that we can loop over each element. When index is less than the length of the list, right? So as long as the index is within this range, we're gonna go ahead and print the element at each index. So we're kind of doing the same thing we did here, you can see. But one thing to keep in mind is that we need to iterate index throughout the loop. Otherwise, when we start off with index equals to 0, this is going to be 0, but then it's always going to remain 0, and this loop will run indefinitely. And I'll go ahead and show you that, but let me separate this. Okay, so if I go ahead and run it like this, it's gonna run continuously, you see, and it's not stopping. So in order to stop this, you're gonna use Control-C. I'm gonna clear out the output. Now we need to increment the index variable, and to do that, you just do index plus equals 1. Now if we run the same code again, you can see that it prints the same output as your for loop. So there you go, that's how you do for loops and while loops. Now I told you I was going to test it on tuples and set of numbers, so let's go ahead and replace list of numbers with tuple. Okay, and if I run this, there's going to be no issues. It runs the same way because tuple and list are both iterable. Tuple is just not mutable, so tuple is immutable. However, for set of numbers, that's not gonna work, and I'll show you here. So if I replace this with that, with that, with that, with that, and this one is gonna work, I'll spoil it here, but essentially if I run it like that, you see type error set object is not subscriptable, meaning that the way sets work is you only get the distinct values in this series or list, which means that your index is all messed up because your index is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but it's going to spit out only 1, 2, 3, 4 because those are the unique elements, and now your index is totally different. So these two won't work, so I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. This one here will work, and the reason this works is because you're iterating over each element in the set of numbers. So you're not iterating over the index, but you're actually iterating over each element. And since set only gives you the unique values, what you're basically gonna see is 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that, because it changes that into that, and what you're iterating over is basically this. And to prove that to you, I'm gonna run it, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, it prints out the unique elements in this set. So I hope you learned how to work with for loops, while loops, and the different use cases with the list, tuple, and set. In the future, we're gonna go more in detail because loops are a really important concept in Python programming. So for now, I'm gonna sign out. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.